Hello all. Today we'll be discussing about a very powerful feature in .NET, which is called extensions. .NET extensions. So what do you mean by extensions? So normally, the plain English word extension stands for when you're trying to extend some functionalities of an existing object. Then you try to use this extension. The same concept applies here as well. So I will just try to show you the power of extension. I have two string objects defined here, string s as bird and string s1 as bird. The only change is the first starting letter. Therefore, let me try to use this first object s dot. I will just try to see that there is an API called is starting with caps, which is defined by the string object. So normally you won't find this particular API defined in a normal string class. Therefore, how this particular API, you are able to invoke this particular API using on this particular string object. Therefore, how it is possible? If I, as you can see, if you hover over this particular API, you will see that this API is an extension API. As you can see in the help tooltip, you can see that it is an extension API which is defined on the string object. So how this is actually an extension API defined by the defined by the user. It is not provided by default from the string library. So this is an API which I have defined on the string object. So what this particular API does is it actually checks whether the starting letter of this particular string is a capital or not. So I will just try to catch the return value here. I will do the same thing here for the other object as well, eval one. And I will just put a breakpoint here and let's try to see what happens. Try to run it. Yeah, breakpoint has been hit. And now you can see if you hover over the bval value on this string s object, the return value is true. That means that this particular string object, the value in the string object is starting with a capital letter. And the second value which is returned is false. That means this is not starting with a capital letter as this is a small b. So how I have defined this particular extension API. So let's go and see how this particular API is defined. If I press F12, I have defined this extension API in a static class called string extensions. You can define any name. You can have any name for this static class. It need not be string extension. It can be any extension as well. And you have to define a static API. The only restriction here is if you are defining a extension API, that API should be a static API. That's the only constraint here. Therefore, you have to define the static API here is starting with caps that I have defined it here as a static API which returns Boolean. And this is the important thing that you have to consider that whenever you define an extension API, it should take the first parameter as that instance of the type on which you are trying to define that extension API. Currently, I'm trying to define an extension API on the type string. Therefore, the first argument which has to be there in the extension API is that object of that particular type with that this pointer, with that this keyword here. Therefore, this is the syntax of defining an extension API. Therefore, this should be followed while you define an extension API. The first argument should definitely be starting with this keyword and followed by the type on which you are defining that extension and that object, that particular type object. And you can define any number of arguments. You can take an integer argument and any number of arguments you can define it here. So the only restriction is the first argument should begin with this particular template. And what I'm doing is I'm checking whether it is not null or empty. I'm checking if the first character is an uppercase character. Then I'm returning that particular value. Therefore, this is the way you have to define an extension API. And here I'm using that extension API in the main method. So you might be wondering where this can be used or in which circumstances this can be used. Extension APIs can be used in context where we have to actually define some utilities on existing objects, and that particular utilities are being shared in different places, or it is those utilities are required in different places in our applications. Therefore, in that context, we can use that extension API on that particular objects to derive the functionalities out. So in this particular context, let's see how without extension API, how we can actually get this functionality or means do this functionality out. One way, what we can do is we can do this s dot. There is an API called starts with, or what you can do is you can actually do first. You can actually go to the section API and you can use the same logic and you can repeat the same logic for the two strings. You can have this b val here, b val equal to, you can do, and you can get this return value by duplicating this logic. The main limitation of doing this way is this particular logic or this particular check getting repeated. It is the same APIs that we are calling, and it is repeated for different objects of typed strings. So this is a code duplication. Therefore, this is a strict no. The other way we can do it is we can define a utility class and define a utility class which actually has this particular logic. Let's define it as static class. Utility, name it as utility, and we can have the same API there. And we will not define this as a we will not define it as a extension API. You can just remove this keyword here. Then it will become a normal static API. And this is the way normally we do in our code. We will define utility class, and we will define that extension those utility APIs in this utility class. And what we try to do in the client side is, or wherever we want to use this particular functionality is, we'll use this utility dot is starting with caps, and we'll pass a particular object here. Therefore, this way, the code duplication can be avoided. But the thing is, you have to actually know which APIs or which utility APIs to call, and where this utility API is defined. You have to know. That is the only limitation here. The other, the third way is using this extension API. Therefore, using this extension API, it is much more intuitive that you have to work on this particular string object, and you have to check whether the starting character is a starting letter or not. You can just use the dot operator with it. You don't need to write a separate utility class and pass the string object there. So it is based on the convenience of the programmer. So that's it for the day. And if you like this particular content, do like us the like button and do subscribe this particular channel for more content like this. And if you are interested in this kind of content, do comment the comment box below. Interested. Thank you and have a nice day.